This ain't the Jungle Book, baby. Hiya! Today I'm going to tell you a story about an epic adventure of survival to be ruler of the jungle. This is the story of Brucey and the bear. It was a clear summer night in the jungle, and the dark sky lit up with a meteor shower. It was like firecrackers, nothing like anyone had ever seen before. Then a giant volcano erupted, Mount Komodo, spewing fire and smoke into the heavens. Every creature in the jungle went silent. It was a moment unlike any other because that night a child was born, a child who would grow up to become the greatest warrior the jungle has ever known. His name was Brucey. As soon as he was old enough, Brucey was sent to the Badger Claw Kung Fu School to be raised and trained. There he would learn ancient techniques, form lifelong friendships, and earn a few enemies along the way. One day at the Badger Claw compound, training came to a halt. Everyone gathered around because today it was Brucey's birthday. At the center of the celebration sat a mysterious wooden box. Two suspicious honey badgers, Noodles and Meatball, were all over it, sniffing it like they already knew what was inside. Meatball sat proudly on top while Noodles circled it with excitement. The room buzzed with anticipation, but no one said a word. Then Meatballs gave the box a solid thump with his paw. Everyone held their breath. Suddenly, the box burst open and out popped a tiny Rottweiler puppy, tail spinning like a helicopter. Brucey's jaw dropped. The puppy let out a bark and launched himself into Brucey's arms like they'd been best friends forever. His name is Little Bear, someone whispered. It was the best gift Brucey could have ever imagined, and the beginning of something unforgettable. It was lunchtime at the compound, and Brucey stepped out into the back deck, where meals were usually fast, simple, and hard earned through sweat and discipline. But what did he see? Noodles and Meatball. Those two naughty honey badgers were kicked back in wooden chairs at the table eating spaghetti. It was dangling from their mouths. Their faces were buried in sauce. No shame whatsoever. They looked like jungle royalty. Brucey folded his arms and shook his head. You two guys are unbelievable. Near the table was Mr. Bones and Wingman, the compound's two pet vultures, who did air patrol. They were the kings of carrion, watching and hoping for leftovers. The lunch didn't last long. Where's Little Bear? Brucey asked, his voice suddenly sharp. Just then they heard barking in the distance. Before you could blink, the two honey badgers exploded into action, bolting off the deck like jungle lightning towards the sound. There was Little Bear trotting along the fence line, nose twitching with curiosity at every new scent, completely unaware that death was watching him. The breeze shifted. From the jungle's edge came a low growl, then silence. Shattered stripes burst out all over the fence. In a blur of fur and fury, the jungle's nightmare, Fang the tiger, was airborne, jaws wide open, eyes locked on the unsuspecting pup. But before he could hit the ground, boom, the trees erupted. Three honey badgers dropped down like jungle commandos, tearing into the tiger with bone crunching precision, with Noodles and Meatballs surrounding Little Bear for protection. Fang didn't know what hit him, and he couldn't get out of the place fast enough. A few days later, it was another beautiful day in the jungle. Brucey and Little Bear were on their usual stroll when they took a wrong turn. And then, bam! Right in front of them stood Habu, the biggest, meanest king cobra the jungle has ever seen. Its hood was flared wide open like a thunderstorm, black and menacing, with ruby red eyes that burned with fury. Beneath Habu were three mysterious black eggs, each veined with glowing gold lines pulsing like molten lava. Brucey froze, caught between awe and fear. Little Bear let out a low growl, instinctively sensing the coiled threat just ahead. High up above, Mr. Bones and Wingman, who helped watch and protect the Kung Fu compound, were perched watching the standoff from a safe distance unfold in tense silence. After a heartbeat that felt like forever, Brucey made the call. It was go time. This wasn't a fight they wanted, not today. So without hesitation, boy, dogs, and birds turned tail and bolted, vanishing into the thick jungle before Habu could even blink. Because sometimes the smartest move is knowing when to run. Back at the Kung Fu compound, the sun had just begun to rise, and honey badgers were already out, because they're always out. Snake Patrol doesn't clock out, and they don't believe in breaks. It was their sacred duty, and they took it seriously. Then suddenly there was a rustle by a tree. It caught their attention. Slithering low and smooth was one of Habu's cousins, a cobra, coiled near the tree, hoping to sneak past unnoticed. Wrong move, big mistake. In a flash, two honey badgers shot up into the tree, taking the high ground. Three more emerged, two from the underbrush and one on the roof, eyes locked, claws ready. Fanning out like a strike team, they surrounded the intruder. The message was crystal clear: leave now or become breakfast. The badgers stared it down, daring him to make a wrong move. The cobra got the hint, and with a flick of its tail, it turned and slithered back into the jungle's shadows. Patrol was resumed and order was restored. Later that week, Percy was training along his favorite path beside a quiet jungle stream. There was a small limestone bridge arched over the water. It was graceful and worn, like a piece of forgotten history. Brucey moved with calm and precision, shadow boxing through his morning kung fu routine. Low stances, sharp strikes, flowing like water. Then snap, his rhythm broke. It was Tigra, the crazy jungle girl. She leaped from the bushes, eyes blazing. Let's see whose kung fu is stronger, my tiger claw or your badger claw. Then she dropped into her fighting stance and challenged Brucey. Brucey didn't even blink. In a blur, fists clashed, feet flew, and then wham! A thunderfoot sidekick from Brucey caught Tigger clean off the ground, launching her into the air and sending her crashing into the stream with a splash and a yell. Before the ripples of the water could even settle, Coda, Tigger's brother, came charging across the bridge to defend her. Coda swung, Brucey ducked, then boom, another Thunderfoot sidekick sent Coda flying into the water with his sister. The two floundered back to the bank. Dazed and dripping in disbelief, Brucey stood calm and collected on the other side, arms crossed, the stream flowing peacefully at his feet. And then he shouted, "Your kung fu is weak. Come back when you have some skills." As if the whole fight had just been another part of his morning workout. One thing was for certain: if you touch Brucey, Brucey will touch you back. The next day, Brucey and Little Bear were out for their afternoon walk along a muddy river bank. The sun was shining off the slow moving water. Brucey was carrying his black bag of tricks, stuffed with every kung fu weapon a young jungle warrior could ever need. Just as they reached a bend of the river, the water rippled. It was El Chapo, the king of the crocodiles. He emerged from the depths like a nightmare made real, with solid gold skin and ruby red eyes glowing, cutting through the water like a torpedo with teeth. But Brucey didn't flinch. He dropped his black bag. But then a second crocodile surfaced beside the first. Little Bear was on full alert, with a low growl in his throat. The crocs swam closer and closer. Brucey stayed as cool as a cucumber. He calmly unzipped his bag and drew out two commas with razor sharp steel, lifting them high like twin thunderbolts ready to strike. There was a long beat of silence. The tension was as thick as jungle fog. Then hiss, the crocodiles paused. They stared at Brucey and the fierce little dog. But then, in a silent agreement, they spun around and slipped back into the muddy water, vanishing without a trace, leaving only ripples where the battle had almost begun. Apparently, this fight wasn't worth the dental work. On their way back to the compound, Brucey and Little Bear moved carefully along the narrow jungle trail. The last light of day melted into dusk, and the air grew heavy, like something was watching them. Then a giant spider landed into the middle of the trail. Brucey froze. Little Bear growled low. The three locked eyes in a standoff. Brucey adjusted his black bag of tricks and kept walking. Taking the long way was not on today's agenda. The trail led them to a cool cave, one that felt like it had secrets crawling in the walls. It was the mystery cave. They followed the spider inside. That's when another monster appeared, a giant scorpion, bigger than the other spider. It rose from the shadows. Before Brucey could react, he realized he was trapped, caught between two nightmares, no way out. With his back against the wall, he reached for the answer, his black bag. Brucey yanked it open and grabbed out two switchblade swords, and in a blur of motion, launched himself into the air. He came down like a thunderstorm, slashing and stabbing, blades plunging into both of the beasts. Their screeches echoed throughout the cave. Brucey landed in a roll, scooped up Little Bear and sprinted out, leaving behind a pile of twitching legs and dripping venom. Alive and breathing, Brucey knew one thing for sure: no jungle bag is complete without a good pair of blades. The next day, Brucey decided to take a walk by himself. Just a quiet moment to practice his kung fu without distractions. He wasn't looking for trouble, just clarity and a way to sort out the storm inside his head. But then the air shimmered. A soft jingling like tiny bells drifted through the trees. Before he could react, Two fairies burst out off the canopy, darting above him in a blur of wings and sparkles. It was Pixie and Trixie. Then two more fairies zipped into view, circling Brucey like orbiting stars. The air pulsed like magic. Without warning, a wave of light lifted Brucey clean off the ground. He spun slowly in midair as they sprinkled enchanted fairy dust all over his body. His eyes rolled back, and then whoosh, he dropped like a rock onto the jungle floor. But there was no pain. Brucey rose, surrounded by a glowing ring of fire, burning bright but not consuming. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. He stood taller, stronger, and faster. The fairy magic had changed him. Above, the fairies hovered, grinning like they just lit a fuse. Whatever they did, it worked. Brucey just got a shot of fairy fuel. Back at the Badger Claw training compound the next day, Brucey woke up feeling stronger and more powerful. His energy surged through every inch of his body. His senses were sharper and more amplified. He could see farther, hear better, and move faster than ever before. At the far end of the compound, he heard something no one else could. The honey badgers were sounding the alert, and then Brucey felt it. The ground trembled beneath like a quiet earthquake. Brucey sprinted towards the forgotten pavilion at the outskirts of the compound, and there he was, King Komodo, stepping into the compound like a jungle tank with diplomatic immunity. The biggest, baddest Komodo dragon the jungle has ever seen. A living relic of jungle royalty. His massive claws dragging across the earth like rolling thunder. Each step was slow and deliberate, towering and scarred and ancient. He was the undisputed ruler of the jungle. Even the fearless honey badgers stood frozen in awe. Swirling around him were the four fairies, including Trixie and Pixie, the translators, the only ones who could speak the language of both beasts and humans. King Komodo wishes to speak to you, Pixie whispered into Brucey's ear. Her voice was soft, musical like the wind through bamboo. Brucey had been summoned. It was a secret meeting. The massive dragon lowered his head, his eyes locked onto Brucey. I've got a big problem in my territory. And Pixie and Trixie said, you're the only one that can help. Brucey didn't hesitate. If King Komodo needed help, he was going to give it. He tightened up the straps on his black bag of tricks, packed with every kung fu weapon, and set off through the jungle with Little Bear at his side, determined to answer the call. The path was long, winding, and strangely quiet. The birds stopped singing, the bees stopped buzzing. It was like the jungle knew this was no ordinary walk. Brucey could feel it in his bones. They were being watched. After what felt like hours, they stepped into a small clearing. There, standing like a forgotten time in the past, was a rusted chain link fence, bent, broken, and scarred, with a jagged hole torn through the middle. A weather-beaten sign hung crooked from one corner with faded letters reading, Danger, do not enter. Then the silence shattered. Thud! One of the king's dragons dropped from a tree and landed on top of the fence, crouched like a sentry from the shadows, his eyes locked on Brucey. But before Brucey could speak, Pixie and Trixie fluttered down from the treetops. Their wings were glowing in the dim light. "This is the entrance to the king's territory," Pixie said, "and time is running out." Brucey nodded. His heart was pounding. He crouched low and slipped through the hole. But just as they did, they heard a distant roar echo through the jungle. Something was waiting for him on the other side. If you want to know what's on the other side of the fence, please subscribe.